Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it, Tom.
Let's start off with a bit of your story because I was watching your TEDx talk before this and really enjoyed it. Really captivating story, decent message behind it, and so I really like kind of got behind it. So, can you tell me a little bit about your background and tell our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I'll give you the Coles Notes version. So I trained martial arts virtually my entire life. Got pretty decent in my young age. Had an opportunity to go train overseas. The ultimate goal was to go to the Olympics in 2008 in Beijing. So I was in Asia, 2006, training at a high level, and I got like this weird like food poisoning symptoms. So I got sick for a while, and it just never got any better at all. Progressively got worse to the point where I was kind of scratching my head, and you have this weird doubts where it's like, I've just literally got up, moved across the country, committed to doing this, and things are not going as planned, which is
Mhm.
normal. But to that level, it was like, great. Now I've got all these doctors and specialists kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Let's do this test. Let's do that test. To give you guys an idea, like when I say I was training at full time at a high level, all of a sudden that gets taken away from me. Imagine getting food poisoning like 2 to 3 times a week. So that's how it initially started, and it just got worse. So after like 2 months of not being able to train and being terribly sick, I came back home, and that's when the I'm not gonna say the fun began, but the fun if you're a doctor running experiment after test after test after test, and never being able to figure out what was going on. So essentially, in a nutshell, 2 years later, I get diagnosed with this rare disease called gastroparesis, and it's a delayed emptying of the stomach. So basically, everything I would eat would just go sit in my stomach, and it would not the colon would not release to allow the food into my digestive tract. So again, food poisoning symptoms. Yeah, it was terrible. Man, it was a terrible time. I developed alopecia. I lost all my hair. I went from 180 pounds down to 124 at my lowest. Uh, yeah, that's needless to say. When you're training at a high level and you're trying to go to the Olympics, and then it gets taken away from you, and there's no known cause as to what's happened. And at the time, there was still no cure for gastroparesis. You can imagine.
Especially when so much of your identity is around like the physical element of what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so much, man. Yeah, so the psyche took a massive hit. Like I was in a dark place for a long time, and hey, we're all human. We all have those thoughts. We all have different thoughts. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and we know when we're in a bad state, sometimes those thoughts that are bad become amplified. Um, so to sum things up, I was like that all the way till 2010. I was trying different medication to try to help, and again, it was just more like a science experiment. But I got to the point where I started to realize that in my mind, I was making this so much worse than it was. Yes, absolutely, I had gastroparesis, clear as day. But man, the more I thought about it, the more anxious I would get. The
Mm.
harder it would be. I'd be like, man, this is my dream, and then all of a sudden it would just come crashing down. So I was putting like so much more weight on my shoulders every single day, and the ramifications were it actually made me feel 10 times worse. So yes, of course I was sick, but I was definitely making it worse, and I see that now. um, so I was walking down the street one day, and I was in a very, very dark place, and I walked up and I was thinking about terrible things about, how could this happen to me? Like, I don't even want to live anymore. And I walk up to a crosswalk, and I go to push the button. And as I do, I look to my left, and there's a boy in a wheelchair, and he's like a teenager. He's like 15, 16 years old, and he has no legs. And this boy looks back at me and he smiles. And then that was the moment that legitimately changed everything. Like, that's the catalyst for me. And at that moment, I remember saying to myself, what is wrong with me? Like, here's a boy in a wheelchair with no legs, and he's smiling, and I'm standing on my own two legs thinking some dark, dark things. And that's when I made that choice. I was like, how I'm viewing things is drastically wrong. Like, there's a big problem with how I'm looking at things in front of me.
Mm.
Um, so I made a conscious decision that day to change the way I viewed things, and it wasn't easy. There was, I still had my moments, but I did start to notice that on a daily basis, things started to change. Even the little things. Like, I remember one day I came downstairs, and my mom just looked at me, And I was like, what's up? And she's like, oh, you just look different today. So like, it's like when you start to do something and then somebody compliments you on it, like that positive
You're definitely
reassurance.
going to do some more of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it started with that. And then I started, learning some more about mindfulness. And then I started practicing meditation and then some breath work. Then I tried to, change up like the stuff that I was eating. And I started making this big comeback. And now all of a sudden I had some momentum and I was moving in the right direction. And something's up in 2012, after 3 specialists in the world told me I would never train martial arts again, I was able to compete at a national level for Canada. So, I mean, it was such a big moment for me, even though it wasn't the Olympics, it was only nationals. But to me, it was like the Olympics. It was like the biggest win of my life. So that's where everything kind of changed for me. And I learned over those few years that the mind is so much more powerful than we think. And then I started to think about, wait a second, there's got to be a gap, because when I was training at a high level, we were training physically at a high level. Like, we had some great coaches, great nutritionists. I mean, the strength side of things, great coaches, but there wasn't much in the way of mindset. And I said to myself, man, if I can potentially overcome gastroparesis, which yes, I still have, but I've been able to manage it no problems since 2011, that what could this be applied to in real life? Or what could this be applied to from an athletic performance standpoint? And that's it, man. And I started dabbling in coaching pro athletes, and it's all I've done since.
Sweet. I want to go right back to the beginning. Did you always have an interest in the mental aspect of sport, or was it kind of not something you're oblivious to, but something you didn't really think about more than the average person?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was oblivious to it, but I would think it was more like, if you want to be the best, you got to do the best work. You got to put in the best. Like the effort.
Very output. Yeah.
Like my dad is this old school, short, stocky Italian guy. Like, like those guys, the deep voice you don't mess with, right? He's 5'7", but I'm scared, shitless of the guy, right? So he's the kind of guy that's like, hey, if you're going to do it, you do it 100% or you don't bother doing it at all. Like that's how things work. So I was very physically like output, as in a sense, like, you're going to do it, do it. But it wasn't so much about the mentality or the mindset that can create that. It was more like, I got to do this. Like, I know I have to.
That must be super useful working with CrossFit athletes. Like, one of the things that I'm sure you see as well is like the desire, like, can I do more to solve this problem? Like, what else can I do? Like, can I push? How much more like than 100% can I give on this? And sometimes it's about actually like slowing down, and it's about treating yourself with kindness and compassion, which is like doesn't come easily to a lot of those. So like having that reference point must be super useful for you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you think about so many people when we look at athletes, for example, how they approach a barbell. Like, sometimes you can even tell right away whether they're going to hit this lift or they're not, just by their physical state, which is a reflection of what they're thinking or how they're approaching the bar, right? So even if they're saying, I got to put output, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, maybe they're putting so much pressure on themselves that's putting themselves in a bad state, which is then losing their output.
Yeah, like how many times do you see? I was in the gym the other day and I saw this girl catch a clean, and as she caught it, she just shook her head. And I was like, oh, okay, like, man, okay, right. That is preposterous for your neck health, like catching totally. 60, 70 kilos and then shaking your head. But also, yeah, that's not going to help you from a mental point of view. So you kind of like had this output based mentality, very much like, can I work harder? Can I push harder? What kind of coaches did you have? What kind of role models do you have?
Yes, I mean, cool. Training at a national level, we got some pretty decent exposure. But my main martial arts master back in the day was, he was actually from Vancouver, who was originated from Hong Kong. Now, their Eastern culture is, again, very output driven. Like, to give you an idea, when I was training full time in Canada, so we would train, 5 or 6 days a week, pretty hard, sometimes 2 sessions, a light form session in the morning and then maybe a harder session in the evening. When I went to Asia for the first time, their training was about 3 times what we were doing here. So the first week that I was there, man, I was getting my butt kicked. I realized like, whoa, there's a massive gap in just physical output. So there's the actual capacity side of things, which is cool. Then there's the technical side of things, especially with martial arts, where it's a little bit more fine-tuned. And then there's the nutrition side of things. So that was kind of the coaching that I always had for martial arts specifically. So I had some decent exposure, some cool cool coaches, but man, again, very few touched on actual mindset.
It's interesting. Like it's Taekwondo, right? That you can
That's right.
compete in. Okay, so like I've been involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a while, like off and on now. Like kind of I did a lot of it for a couple of years and then less now. Like everyone who seems to do BJJ
Sure.
who got excited by Joe Rogan talking about it then gets
Yeah, yeah.
distracted. Like and the mentality there seems to be maybe it's the physical thing of like I'm not actually striking, I'm grappling. And it like there's a little bit I felt like it was a little more supple and soft and gentle. Just the mentality, maybe it's the Brazilian aspect of it as well coming into it. But then there's other martial arts which have this very kind of rigorous, strict, do the thing in these exact kind of blocked out ways. And it seems like you got that side of things.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that again, martial arts specific. Like if you look at something like Wing Chun or Wushu, like these martial arts are so centered from like breathing, like being able to put your body into a specific state to generate a certain amount of power. Those martial arts, I mean, I have the utmost respect for all martial arts. It just depending on what you're looking for. Me, the big thing for Taekwondo is I was good at it, and I loved the fact that it was in the Olympics. So that was like, oh, that's what I want. That's what I want.
Pretty satisfying to kick someone in the head too, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, Taekwondo's got some cool aspects for sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So you had these cool aspects. You had these kind of pretty cool coaches. You had like a lot of intense people. Who were your role models outside of sport?
So when I would say actually the biggest role models that I had, definitely my family. Of course, my old man. Like to give you an idea about my dad, and I reference him quite a bit. So I'm Italian. I obviously played soccer growing up. And my dad was clearly my coach. I mean, that's just how it works. And I always played defense. So I'd never scored a goal. And I was like, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old. And I get an opportunity that I can see, like I get the ball in my end and I see like a window. Okay. And I'm like, I'm going for it. And I literally go end to end with this soccer ball. I'm like deking out everybody. I mean, I probably wasn't, but that's the vision I have now. Right. So I'm like doing all these crazy moves. And then I score this crazy goal, and it's like the TSN turning point. Like this should be on like the highlights reel. Okay, again in my mind, right? But I score my very first goal at like 12 or 13 years old, so you can imagine what it's like, right? I'm super pumped, and I look over at my dad, it's my dad, man. You know, I can't wait to see his reaction, and he's pissed, like livid, man. Okay, and the first thing that comes out of his mouth is referee sub. And he benches me
because you weren't doing the technical right defending job,
dude. I'm now in like shambles. I'm like an emotional mess. Okay. So my dad's like super strict. My mom is like the ultra caring, compassionate. I'm still her baby boy. Like, you know, that kind of, so I always had like the extremes and I don't understand what's going on. We get in the car, it's silence. And he says, you have no idea why I benched you. And I was like, no, I don't know. And he's like, if you're too busy trying to play somebody else's position, how are you going to play yours? So, okay, I get it, right? So that's the kind of mentality that I grew up with. So from a role model of discipline and execution, it's always been my dad. And like always, you know, and then there's the caring, loving, compassionate side, which, you know, I really felt like I grew into when I started practicing meditation. That's definitely from my mom. And then, you know, along the journey, of course, I've had some cool executive coaches, and still now I still have a coach as well.
Yeah. Coaches need coaches too.
Always.
When you came across the mindfulness meditation world, that's often a juxtaposition to Western culture of go, be incredibly productive and like almost that toxic productivity world. What kind of how was that juxtaposition actually before we get into techniques?
Yeah. So basically, after I came back and fought my way back into nationals in 2012, now it was like, okay, at the time I was 30. So, I mean, I was already old competing in martial arts. And so I was like, okay, now what do I do? Right. I mean, I spent the last 10 years trying to make it to the Olympics. Clearly that's done. Like it's time to retire from, high competitive martial arts. what am I going to do? Like, I had no idea what I was going to do for work or anything. And my martial arts master, who was here in Vancouver, he said, "Hey, I think it's important for you to take some time for you. Make sure your health's still in check." And he's like, "I want you to come with me and try to." I don't think he said it, because I would have been like, "What are you talking about?" Like, he's like, I want you to come with me, and we're gonna do some things or whatever. So I go to this place, and it's like ultra quiet, and like there's people sitting on these cushions. And again, I'd practiced mindfulness at my house, by myself, and tried, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is different," but I'm coming in with an open mind. If I don't, I'm gonna get in trouble. So let's go, right? So then I sit down to start doing my things, and I'm just like rocking back and forth, the monkey mind, like just like, what's going on? Like, what am I gonna eat for dinner tonight? What am I doing? Right? Just the usual. And he pulls me out like 20 minutes later, my martial arts master, and he's like, "Hey, look, like, I'm not gonna ask this much of you, but I ask you to commit to this and just give this a legitimate shot." And I was like, "Okay, sorry, sir, no problem. Let's go." So I go back into this meditation hall, and I just let go. I remember just letting go. And I just said, "Okay, I'm just gonna embrace this." Man, I went every single day for the next 2 weeks. It was not that it was easy. It wasn't, it was tough at first, but then I just said, well, if I'm actually going to get something out of this, I can't have any preconceived expectations on what I'm supposed to be getting. So why don't I just go through the process and just let it be? And man, I fell drastically in love with that entire state of just letting things be.
What was that kind of process like? The kind of the time domain you're going for, the kind of techniques that you were taught, was it very much like, because you get things like Dzogchen meditation, which is like, okay, you want to turn inwards and recognize the fundamental kind of nature reality. And then you got other forms of meditation, which are very much like, oh, just sit in restful awareness, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's three big ones that I would practice as I continue to practice martial arts or meditation. Sorry. So I actually ended up teaching it after about 2 years. So there's a standing meditation where you stand still upright. There was a sitting meditation, like literally sitting on a cushion. And there was also a walking meditation, which I absolutely adored.
Okay, the two types of walking meditations that I'm aware of. One of them is like you're watching the world come towards you and you're seeing your place in that kind of transition. And then there's the other one, which is like the sensation based. Which one were you going for?
Yeah, so sensation based, and mine was it's essentially walking in a circle. It's called Bagua, and it's like you're walking around a tree essentially. And the reason why I fell in love with Bagua is because it was actually formed. It's like a meditation and a martial arts mixed together. So there's a lot of cool videos of Bagua. Man, yeah, like thinking about this, it makes me smile.
You're so stoked.
Yeah, I tell you, you're bringing me back. You're bringing me back, man. Yeah. So that journey for those 2 years, so let's call it from 2012 to 2014, 15, was incredible, man. Like incredible. And a lot of the practice that I do with my athletes today still incorporates some form of meditation, visualization, breathing, and so on. It's such an incredible lesson that for me, it changed my life.
Yeah, that mindfulness and the ability to see your thoughts as something separate from you is what I feel is like the kind of the foundation of mindset. Like once you start being able to separate your experience and not get so absorbed by your thoughts and treating them as this kind of indisputable truth, like whether that's through meditation or whether it's through journaling or whether it's through reading philosophy, like once you've got that perspective on your internal state, that is like the start of a superpower.
Totally. And that's the starting of my program. So when I work with athletes today, that's literally the first thing that we work on is increasing your level of self-awareness. Like I believe that everybody knows exactly who they are, but that's again, such a bold statement. But at the same time, I feel that we don't know who we are at all. Like a lot of times there's this subconscious or preconceived notion of what the society expects us to be like. So we think we're that person, but a lot of times in reality, we're not. And I mean, I was one of those people as well. Like we're all the same in terms of that. Like we're all human, right?
Yeah, my friend Casper talks about this idea of it's like the I think he even says like there's the idea of the onion, like you're peeling layers of the onion that we hear the whole time. But he said, what are you left with at the end of that? You're left with pieces of onion that you can't eat and smelly fingers. And like then you've got like, but he says there's got to be like a better example, which is like there's a light, it's like a bulb, and like as you go through life, more and more layers are caked on until you kind of forget what's in that internal piece, and you start taking, or the light's hidden, you start taking the outside piece as your reality, and you start confusing it with who you are. So it's like, oh, I am this type of person. That's my belief that starts to become unequivocal. It's like, this is foundationally me. And through that observation, it's like, okay, now I can see that that is not actually me. There's a difference.
Totally. Very well said. I love that analogy, man.
Yeah. Good with a bit of humor in there. We use some journaling techniques to do that. How do you start off? And you don't have to go into specifics, but like, what's the broad point that you start with?
Yeah, journaling is exactly it. I think it's incredible. So we think, in my TED Talk, I reference how we have 35,000 subconscious decisions we make every single day. Getting up, standing, walking, all this kind of stuff, right? And then there's our conscious thoughts, things that we are actually consciously thinking. And then there's our subconscious thoughts, things that are on in the background that just, they're on like hybrid mode, right? So the very first place I start with athletes is I would ask them, first off, do they think they know what they're consciously thinking every single day? And this is just like a surface level question. And some people say, yeah, of course, I know exactly what I'm thinking. And some people are like, well, I don't know. I never really thought about it. And it's still mind-boggling to me that, how we feel in this moment, exactly like our state is a direct reflection of what we're thinking and how we're choosing to view the world in front of us. That, to me, in my belief, ultimately affects our physical state, our current state, how we feel. So if we're thinking certain things, that's going to drastically impact how we feel, good or bad. So always for me, throughout the day, I'll get my athletes or whoever I'm working with to take note of their conscious thoughts. Now, people are like, wow, God, I can't write all that stuff down. That's crazy. I think so much stuff. I'm going to forget at the end of the night. So I always get them to keep a notepad with them and legitimately write down one conscious thought after another. Now, I don't care if they say, like, I got to go to the washroom or I need to make coffee or whatever. But definitely the ones that, when you look at CrossFit athletes, it's like, oh man, I wonder what the open workout's going to be. Like, I would write that note down, right? Or I didn't do well in this workout, or this and that and whatever. So the high level thoughts, and I would get them to start there. And 90% of the time, after doing that for the first little bit, the majority of people are going to be like, I had no idea I was thinking these things. Yeah. And unfortunately, I hate to preface this, but more times than not, we see a lot more negative thoughts than we do positive thoughts.
Yeah, it's amazing to how many CrossFitters how often they're thinking, oh, I should check the leaderboard. I should stalk so-and-so on Instagram just to check what they're doing. I should, see what tomorrow's workout is, when it doesn't actually matter right now. And it's like this, when you've really come down to it, and when you've really trained yourself and you've seen so many different athletes' narratives, like the amount of thoughts that are driven by fear, it's like, completely, man, this is incredible to see. And it's nothing that's broken with athletes to see it. Like there's nothing that's, like, I suppose, wrong, because there's no choice because of everything that's conditioned to totally be that way. But it's kind of it's shocking to you when you first realize it. It's like, oh, I didn't realize what's going on.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. Give me chills, buddy. Like, when I think about this, like, for the people that are listening that are competing in CrossFit, just look at the open for the last little bit. Think about how many times you saw somebody on Instagram and said, oh man, they moved their burpees, they cycled really fast, or they moved this really well, or they did this, or they did that, or they checked the leaderboard. Oh my God, this person beat me, or I beat this person. Like, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But
or they've got better apps than me, or they're getting more followers than me, or it's like, it becomes those kind of metrics too.
Totally. And then it compounds from there as well. It could be from that, it'd be like, man, wow, they got better abs than me, so obviously their diet's better than mine, and now I need to change my diet. It's not good. Right. Next thing you know, they're lying in bed. It's 11:30 at night and they can't close their eyes because their mind's running.
Or we go one level deeper and we think, what does that actually mean? And it's like, oh, maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I'm not desirable. Maybe I'm not the person I wish I was. Maybe I'm not going to be have affection. Yeah.
Maybe I should just quit doing this entirely. I don't think this is for me anymore. Yeah. It's terrifying, that snowball effect. Like, the ramifications of one conscious thought can drastically change everything. And again, I think for the people listening, if you were to stop and think for just a couple seconds, because sometimes it's like, well, I don't think like that. That's not really me. That's because a lot of the times it's actually happening behind the scenes. Like, because maybe we were conditioned that way. Like every year the Open comes around, I bet you everybody has a set way that they do things because we've conditioned ourselves that way. And that's what becomes terrifying, is when we start to have these subconscious thoughts because we're conditioned, that becomes our new regular, and that's, to me, what can definitely hold back a lot of incredible talent is the condition that they've created.
Yeah. And that point needs to be reinforced again, that it is the normalcy of those thoughts because we're encapsulated by them for our entire life. That is the kind of the thing that needs to be questioned, because it's like, if you're completely, you can get Stockholm syndrome by repeatedly kind of exposing yourself to that person, or you can well, look what's happening in Russia at the moment, like the beliefs going on around kind of what is right and wrong, and also what I suppose what's happening around the world with various propaganda, various media, and like what you consider normal, like that is happening internally too. We're our own propaganda machines, and it can either work for you or it can work against you.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I always see that at the end of it all, we have the ultimate control. And that's why I can never stress this enough, that how we choose to view what's in front of us is a choice we make. The thoughts that we have in our head are our thoughts. Like, Tom, if I say to you, think the color blue, and you think the color blue, that maybe I told you to think the color blue, but you are still thinking it yourself. Like, that's a choice that you are thinking. You are thinking the color blue. It's not my thought anymore. It's yours. So no matter what, you ultimately can control what we choose to think or not. It's your brain, nobody else's. It's just a matter of having the ability to have full control of that.
Yeah, there's that. Go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when we have full mental control, that's when we can drastically change our physical state, which will then, the ramifications are the results that we put up in a score or an event or a competition.
There's that quote, something along the lines of, you've got two lives and the second one begins when you realize you've only got one. And I think the same applies when it comes to mindset too, in as much as there's like this distinction. Most people live their lives in a way that is kind of unattuned to the subconscious mind, and we're not going to hear it and we're not going to condition it. And until you're aware of the thoughts, and until you're aware of the emotions and the kind of the separation between you and your mental state, you don't have the choice. I believe anyway, you don't have the choice to control it. But as soon as you have that truth explained to you, and that you truly understanding that you are not your mental state, you are something experiencing it, that then gives you the option to progress through it and to change it. And then you have the choice to determine what you're thinking and take more control of it. And it's not an instant, now I can control every thought. It doesn't work like that, but you can experience them. You can choose whether you believe them, and you can just like decide whether you're going to act on that or just see it as another thought, and it's not important.
Totally. It's spot on. It's exactly why I said I believe people know exactly who they are, and they don't at all.
Yeah.
It's like that separation between conscious and subconscious.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And if you want proof of how much the subconscious mind is in control, just like watch for how many times you surprise yourself. And it's a lot more than you realize. And yeah, it's a lot in there. Okay. So martial arts, went through the medical issue. You had that moment that was a revelation to you when you saw someone else choosing their mental state. That must have been pretty drastic for you. And again, that whole butterfly effect, to me, it still blows my mind. Like that drastically changed everything for me. I can literally trace where I am today back to that very moment. Yes, there's a lot of turning points we have in our lives, for sure. But for me, that was definitely the biggest. That's my catalyst, right? And now I respect that more than ever because I live that. I embrace that. That my whole business is built off of that concept. That the reality of how we choose to view things drastically changes our life. Like, it's a choice we make. And in my TED Talk, I reference at the very end, you're one conscious decision away from an entirely different life. And that
time in that moment, I said, I need to turn my adversity into my advantage. If this boy can smile in a wheelchair with no legs, and I'm standing on my own 2 feet and depressed with thoughts of suicide, there's a serious problem in my head here. Like there's something wrong. To me, the ultimate power again is having full conscious control. And that's the way I do my best to live my life. And again, I'm still human, man. I have my moments.
Like, you're not perfect.
Yeah. Unfortunately, just ask my ex-girlfriend. She'll tell you all about it. Listen, we always have our moments. And so, man, I remember in 2018, I was at a Tony Robbins seminar, and he distinctly said, even himself has his days. He's like, I have my moments. I have my days, just like everybody else. We're all human. The difference, though, is he has the ability to snap out of it a lot sooner than somebody who's not practicing it. And that resonated with me. It's okay to have moments, but that's why we have to have tools or certain things that we can do to take back conscious control. Right?
It's almost like there's like this amplitude of mistake, and it starts off like really quiet volume, and most people miss that, and then it builds and it builds, and like the amplitude builds, and like it becomes more obvious, and then like even the outside world is going like, oh, I can recognize that, but you're still oblivious to it because it's kind of normal to you, and then you fall into that mental pattern, and then it's like the point you notice it is when you're like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like, how is or you're like, oh, I failed this competition that I was going for, or I massively underperformed, or I ate crap food, or just spent 3 hours scrolling through Instagram, comparing myself to other people, thinking awful things about myself. And like, that's the point. But if you kind of trace that back, there's a really small moment. And it was, like you say, one thought, one kind of choice, or one kind of thing that if you're more aware of, you could have the potential to change that.
Totally. Yeah, very well said. Couldn't agree more.
So, God, there's so much I want to go into here. This is dangerous. I'm going to be speaking to my fiance all night about this, and it's going to okay, that's good. So we have. What would you recommend actually to someone who, because not everyone's going to go through the same experience as you did. Not everyone's going to get to such a low. How would you recommend someone kind of, if they feel they need that revelation, where would you think people should start?
Oh man, no, here we go. Now I'm going to be in the same place. I just want to talk nonstop. So check us out. I have this belief. So if you look at some of the greatest people in the world that have accomplished incredible things, like Tony Robbins, like some of these people that changed lives, right? A lot of these people have one thing in common, which is they face like massive adversity or trauma. Okay. So you think about some of the greatest leaders, maybe they've overcome something huge, which puts them on the map. And that's what their story is based off of that. And I can relate because I had that massive trauma, right? But it doesn't mean we have to have trauma to take control or to do something great. And the beautiful part about this is that the mind does not know the difference between reality, what's in front of us, versus what we construct, like what we tell it every single day. I'm not saying go lie to yourself at all, but that is why we have people that are compulsive liars, and then they believe it. Even though something didn't happen, they've convinced themselves it did. But that can work with us to our benefit. It just depends on what we apply it to. So if we haven't had some massive trauma or some huge adversity and we want to make a big change, we got to find our purpose. Okay. And to me, purpose trumps motivation tenfold. Like motivation will always come and go, but purpose is the driving factor that makes us move forward. Okay. So I would say to those listening is, what is your true purpose? And if you don't know, it's okay. I would ask them, if they don't know what they want in life, I would damn well know that everybody knows what they don't want in life. Mm-hmm. So take a look at what you don't want and reverse engineer it from there. Do the things that are opposite to what would make you what you don't want. Okay, so you either have purpose. If you don't know what you want, take a look at what you don't want and build it from there.
What's your purpose?
Oh, good question, man. My purpose is the fear of living in regret. So I'll tell you a quick story. Is I look back now in 2008 or 2006 when I got sick in Beijing, going for the Olympics in 2008. I realize now that there was so much more I could have done and I didn't. It was easy for me to play the victim card and say, look, I'm sick. I can't do this. I'm throwing in the towel. Maybe it got too tough. Even the guy who was like, output, do it 100%. I threw in the towel and I gave up. Now, don't get me wrong. I had an illness, but I've proved that I was able to overcome this illness. I can't go back, man. Like I cannot go back to compete at Brett at 24 years old to go to the Olympics. It's done. That is what pushes me so damn hard every single day. So I have to accept the fact that that's gone, but I refuse to let it happen again. Just a quick side note. I had this conversation with Emily. So Emily Rolfe at the CrossFit Games this year. She got really sick. She got E. coli. And there was a moment when I looked at her and I was like, in my mind, I was like, man, I've never seen her this sick in my life. Like ever. I don't think she can be able to compete at the next event. And at the games, you don't make the event, you're done. And I said to her, if you don't dig deep and change your state right now, you'll regret this moment for the rest of your life. Because in a week time, when you look back, that E. coli poisoning isn't going to be as bad as you think it is. Sure, it's bad, but you must get out there and go right now because you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And that's the power of my purpose, man. Like for me, that's what drives me every single day. A fear of regret.
It's cool to hear that story from your perspective, because when she was on the show, she told from her perspective, and like seeing what that did to her and giving her the kind of, not necessarily the boost, but the uncovering of what was actually important, that really drove her. So like, again, shows the power of having a mindset coach. Like it shows the power and having someone who can flip your perspective, because in those times, you're not always going to be able to do it yourself. You're not always going to be able to, like, yeah, sure, eventually you can get better at it. But like having that team around you, someone who can like see with perspective the situation you're in and say, hey, here's it back at you. But also you having that ability to accept that, and I suppose the perspective that to see like actually they know what they're talking about too. That's a really important tool.
Yeah, man, that was one of the most incredible athletic performances I've ever seen in my life, done by Emily. I mean, I've spent countless hours with her. We live in the same city, right? And I'd never seen her like that. So I remember distinctly having this conversation and saying, like, there's millions of people that would do anything to be in your shoes. Millions. And, you get a bit of a reaction. And as a coach, you know how we are. We build on that, right? And then I remember hitting her with this, like, I can't go back to the Olympics, but you have a choice right now to get out on that field and go compete. I don't have that choice. I don't have that option, and that's power. That's power. And then I know the last message to her was, I just proved that it can be done. I talked to her about Tim Grover's book, Relentless. And I said, Michael Jordan, he got food poisoning the night before and he was sicker as a dog. Tim Grover says he's never seen him like that before, but yet he goes out there and he has one of the best games of his career. So it can be done. Like she can do it. It's about making a choice. And she did. And she goes on to win an event.
Yeah, that's the bit that Emily talks about as well, that kind of reference and like seeing that someone else has done it. And it's like, it kind of is, I suppose it's almost similar to, but a different version of you seeing that guy in the wheelchair. It's like the kind of, oh, that's what actual suffering is. And like what I have right now isn't as bad as I thought. And I'm choosing to feel this way.
Totally. But we do that every single day. And what's wild too is if you look back at like the Roger Bannister story, where remember everybody was saying like, you can't break the 4-minute mile. And then he went and did it. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, a bunch of people started doing it as well. So like it can be done. Even if things that have not been achieved, they can be achieved, but it's going to go back to their purpose. Again, it's going to go back to what is driving you to want to achieve it, because it can be achieved. I may not be able to go to the Olympics for martial arts at 24, but damn well, maybe I could do it in somewhere else. Like it doesn't mean I can't, right? It's a choice.
So when you're finding your purpose, you're thinking about like goals and what you want to attain. And then how are you working back from that? Like, what's your process look like?
So my biggest thing is that for me to push forward and not letting a regret, I need to be aware of my current surroundings and what it is that I'm wanting to achieve in this moment. Okay. So it's funny. It's still that lesson from my dad. Like you give it 100% or don't bother giving it at all. I realize now I didn't give it 100%. Right. Maybe in that moment, Emily couldn't give it 100% physically because of her capacity, but maybe she could give it 100% mentally, which would then allow her physical body in that state to do the best that it possibly could. Okay. So for me, it's like that total check-in of where I'm at today and what is my actual application. So for me, there's 3 steps. So I have an area of focus. So this is what I'm currently working on. What are the tactics that make up my area of focus? Okay, so what is the 2 or 3 plans that I need to actually do to make up this area of focus? What are the behaviors that make up those tactics? So what are the measurable things that I need to do every single day? So for example, let's say I want to put on 5 pounds of muscle. That's my area of focus. Okay, I need to train like this. I need to get a coach. I need to change my nutrition. Those are the tactics. The behaviors are the things that you're doing every single day that are measurable. That is how I maintain my output. That's how I make sure that I'm executing what I need to execute. Because it's very simple for me to sit down on the couch and scroll on Instagram and think, oh man, look how good this dude looks, or this person's so much better than me here. It's very easy to do that. And then we get sidetracked. But if there's something that's tangible in a sense of behaviors, then it's measurable, then you can actually see if you achieve it. It's like somebody saying, oh, I went to the gym today, so I'm good. Maybe they didn't do nothing in the gym, right? Just because you went to the gym doesn't measure anything. Like what you did in the gym is what needs to be measured. Follow?
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen the Piagetian model of development, like how babies develop according to Jean Piaget?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Cool. So it maps really nicely onto what you're talking about there, about having the kind of the small behaviors building towards a bigger purpose. So he basically says that a baby learns to like lift its hand or whatever. And it's like, oh, I can lift my hand now. And it's obviously not a conscious thing, but then it's like, I can lift my hand and hit my mobile. And then they hit that and then it spins around. Then they realize that gets attention. And then it realizes that develops them. And he's talking about how that builds from, oh, I want to get food, to I want to be a good child, to I want to be like that. And it builds up in layers of development. And one way that I think we can, like, very similar to you, like looking to find a purpose and like what ultimately means being a good person to us, is looking at our behaviors, looking at what we actually enjoy doing, looking at what we want to do, and then mapping those up. So what does it mean when I do all of those things? Oh, it means that they build towards, I'm a better type of athlete. Okay, a good athlete means a good person, and there's lots of steps in between that, but it's like ultimately our reputation within ourselves, and it maps even from like a developmental psychology point of view to what we're doing now, which is kind of like performance optimization.
Totally. Wow, I like it. I'm gonna have to look into this because I like this.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about it really well.
Okay.
He talks about Jean Piaget. I think he does like 3 or 4 lectures on him that are like really cool. Okay, right. There's so much that I want to dig into. When did you start working with athletes?
So I started about 2015, 2016, and initially started with martial arts athletes. Obviously, that was my connection, right? So I worked with a lot of national team athletes for about a year. It was just more like for beta, like for fun. Like I was like, hey, look, this is what really, really helped me. Because I had a few people, like my story kind of went not viral, but it got picked up quite a bit. So people were asking me like, how did I do this? Like what happened? So I just started sharing my practices. And then I was like, hey, there's got to be some kind of application here. So it was more like just trial and error. And then I started practicing things on myself. So it just kind of started to compound from there. And then I started getting a couple other athletes, and then in other sports. And then we talk about that butterfly effect. I bumped into Kyle Rolfe, so Emily's husband. And this is a great story. I was wearing a CrossFit t-shirt. And for those of you who don't know, Kyle Rolfe's a big guy. Okay. He's a big guy. And I bump into him and he says, oh, you do CrossFit? I'm not like I'm in crazy shape or anything, but I'm in lean, whatever. Right. And I'm like, yeah, like I do CrossFit. Clearly you don't, buddy. Like, yeah, I do CrossFit. And then, and he kind of laughed and he's like, oh, my wife just made the games. And I was like, man, what games, man? Like what games? And he's like, the CrossFit games. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Like, no idea. And this is like early 2019. And he's like, no. She made the CrossFit games, man. She just won Granite Games. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this guy's legit. And I was like, oh, dude, who's your wife? And he said, Emily Rolfe. And I was like, well, wow. So we start talking and asked, what I do, whatever. And that was it. And I met Emily and we started talking. And I know right away, I was like, man, this girl, she's going to laugh. She probably thinks like, this is such BS. And she's like, and she even says it now. She's
Yeah,
like,
she
man,
talks through that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's like, this is hocus pocus, man. And yeah, so we started working together early 2019 before the games, and that was it, man. That's it. And
Yeah.
she goes out there
She
and crushes
talks.
her rookie year.
Yeah, she talks about I can't remember how she referred to it, like a little mental game or something you did to begin with. Do you
Oh
remember
yeah,
that?
oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was such a oh man, this is so cool. It's again, so just standard questions, but there was a fun thing that I had where it was like, I want you to think about two words that go aligned to each other. So it'd be like sand and beach or socks and shoes. So there was two lines that had 20 words, so 10 sets of pairs that all made the same sense. They said the same thing. So you read those, okay, cool, makes sense, water, glass, whatever, right? Then the next section was the same thing. It was very, very similar. So again, same type of number or same type of words, but one of the words was missing a letter and it just had like an underscore. It was like missing a letter. So I got them to read those ones and you have to fill in the blank. So she's like, okay. So she does it. And then I flipped the page upside down and I was like, I want you to like, tell me which ones you remember. And they only remember the ones that they actually had to consciously think about, like legitimately think about, the ones that they had to fill in the blanks. And I was like, okay, so you remember this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And you're like, yeah, flip the page back over. So they only remember that one. And I said, see the power of your conscious thoughts? Like, this is what you're consciously thinking. Look at the ramifications of it. That's all you remember. So when we highlight things in this conversation, like when you're consciously thinking, oh my God, this person's better than me. Maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe I'm just going to throw in the towel. Maybe I'm not loved. Like that snowball effect. So it was just like a small little thing. And she was like, wow, I never really thought about it like that. And then I asked her about her conscious thoughts. Like, what does she think about throughout the day? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, okay, tell me some of the things you can remember. And then we start talking about it. And there was a couple highlighted pieces that fall into a different category. And it's like, see, this is exactly what we're talking about. And that was it, man. I just built some trust. And now it's almost 3 years later. And we've seen it all together, man.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's great. It's you've obviously got a gift in and have worked very hard out rather than the gift, I suppose. But you also have a natural proclivity to explaining things like that very well, and it's really cool to see. And like giving people that insight, it's awesome. What are the biggest problems that you see CrossFit athletes working through?
I guess it depends on. I mean, there's a few for sure. You look at. I would say, okay, so the big one is still going back to what are we consciously feeding ourselves? Like I would say to you that this is probably the biggest and the quickest fix that could have such a huge ramification of change for them. So what are we consciously thinking? Like we talked about. Second one would be the whole perfection bug of maybe the open's not going perfect or I'm not executing it perfect because of this state that I'm in. So when it comes time to a competition, so we get some athletes that PR competition and we get some athletes that are completely the opposite. Again, that's totally controlled by our state. There's very, very few athletes that can go to bed the night before a competition and just feel fine. Like it's very rare, right? I mean, we might go to bed not sleeping perfectly when we have to have a meeting tomorrow morning, let alone competing at the highest level, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that preemptive phase to put ourselves in a good state prior to a competition or during a competition are the two biggest things.
Cool. What do you feel are the most effective ways for athletes to work on this?
So two things. So the first thing for the self-awareness, take note of your conscious thoughts. Once you have a better idea of what you're consciously thinking, then you can have a much better idea of what that is going to do in terms of affecting you. So for example, let's say I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I scroll through Instagram and I'm like, oh my gosh, this athlete did this open workout so much better than me. And the snowball starts. Well, if you tag how that makes you feel, like, okay, great, now I feel like shit. Now I feel completely demotivated or I don't feel good. Like we created that state. Now we're putting ourselves in a bad position. Okay. When we're in that bad state, people tend to make poor decisions. So I have a quick high level thing, just not to sidetrack too far, but my belief is people think things, which then trigger an emotion. Okay. That emotion, we then take action and make decisions based off how we feel. So we take action off of that, and then it usually gives us a result. Okay. So it's thought, emotion, action, result.
Mm-hmm.
Again, when we think certain things when we're in a shit state, we tend to make emotional based decisions. We've all been there. I know when we're in an argument and we say something we shouldn't have said and it just comes blurts out and you're like, did I just say that? Like, that's not going to end well. Or I'm not going to hit this barbell and I'm putting myself in a shitty emotional state and I go to take action and I just like high pull a clean and dump the bar. That's thought, emotion, action, result. For me, I want to train my athletes to have a conscious thought, take immediate action. Okay. So when you have that conscious thought, you're putting yourself into a good state, which is going to take immediate action, which is going to give you the result that you desire. Then you can embark in the emotion. When you hit a PR, then you can hit the emotion. Okay. So it's thought, action, result, emotion. Same four things. These are the four things as humans, just changing up the order. For me to do that, if we find ourselves in an emotional state, we need to change our physical state somehow. So if you're sitting on the couch scrolling on Instagram and you're viewing, or you're looking at the leaderboard and you feel depressed, you feel like shit, and you need to jump up off the damn couch, smack yourself in the ear or something to disrupt that emotion, to give yourself the opportunity to take back conscious control. Okay. Like even Tony Robbins talked about changing your state. All right. Mm-hmm. I want you to think about, I don't know, maybe you're super sad, super depressed, and somebody starts tickling you. Like, you're going to change your state. It's going to disrupt that emotion. All right. Mm-hmm. I have a little tiny trampoline that I jump on before I jump on a Zoom call with my clients. It's like just little mini trampolines, man. Like for me, I jump on that trampoline, it puts me into a certain state. Okay. So once you're in a certain state that you create, then you can make the choice as to what you want to apply it to. So once, again, not to go too far, but I would say the majority of the people find themselves in a shit state, excuse my language, and don't realize it until it's too late. The results of them missing a lift or not being able to sleep are a big thing. That always goes back to the level of self-awareness.
Because then we have the familiarity of that state. It's comfortable to exist in a way that you're comfortable with. It's like, it's what you know, it's the known, and you don't have to risk the step into the unknown. And that is the kind of the dangerous thing to do when we're taught to seek safety. We also have, like, it's funny, like as you're writing down your model there of thoughts and emotions and behaviors and success, I was writing down, like, it prompted me to try and remember ours and the way we kind of work it through and kind of look at the differences. And we have kind of a very similar thing, like working from like success on one end back through behaviors and physical sensations, including there. The difference there that's quite interesting is, like, we've got thoughts and emotions on the same kind of area, like, because sometimes you'll have a thought first and it'll spark an emotion, and sometimes you have an emotion first and it sparks a thought. But why they happen, I think, is because of the interaction between your beliefs and the narratives you hold and external events. And that's what creates one of them. And I think some people are more susceptible, and some people will feel thoughts more readily, like can hear their internal language more readily than others who will think they'll feel those emotions more readily. Like, I'm personally a thinker. Like, I'll think thoughts and then I'll go, oh yeah, emotion, that does come along. Like a lot of guys, it's like, oh yeah, I do experience emotion too. But then going one level back beyond the beliefs, it's like, what created those beliefs? And it's like, what influences did you have? You had the environment around you that created a lot of beliefs. You had evolutionary needs, like kind of your biology and like what you're set up to have. So a negativity bias, for example. You have your education, what you're explicitly told by your family. So like your dad, for example, saying like, you got to give 100%. Which one haven't I gone? Oh, your experience. So like, what worked for you, what didn't work for you in the past. And like, but it's all the same kind of things that we're talking about. Like, I don't think there's a huge amount of difference there. It's like, there's just a different perspective on it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you're spot on. Everything you're saying, these all completely make sense. I think that I agree with you. The thought and the emotion, they're hand in hand. What if we find ourselves in a state? So for example, let's go back to a 22-2, that deadlift workout. So maybe when things start to get really bad and those burpees, everything starts to hurt. If I just take a second and I'm like engulfing in this emotional pain, like my posterior chain's cooked, my lungs are spiking, everything's screaming at me to stop. I'm now embarking in that emotion. So now all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm emotional, which has then taken 2 seconds off the clock and I'm not consciously told myself to get back to the bar. So when I say, instead of having thought motion, I want thought immediate action. I want the second I dump this bar, my chest is on the floor. So the second I put this barbell down, I'm dropping to the floor. That is thought immediate action. So I'm thinking that, and then I'm going to tell myself to do it. So that's the immediate action. That allows the conscious mind to shut off the subconscious, to shut off the thought of my lungs are going to explode, my quads or my posterior chain are killing me, and not get stuck in that realm. Does that make sense?
Do you think it's possible to shut off all subconscious thought?
I don't think it's possible entirely. I shouldn't say that. I don't think it's possible for the vast majority of us. I'm not saying it's not possible. I think the amount of work to do that would be massive. And I don't know many people. Yeah. I don't know many people that could physically get to that place. Yeah. I don't think it's, even me, man, I've practiced this countless hours. I can tell you I'm nowhere near that.
Yeah. There's you haven't achieved satori yet. Like you haven't found that enlightenment piece. You haven't completely quieted your mind. Okay. Like, because the reason I'm asking that is because obviously the subconscious mind has evolved for a reason. Like it's there, and it would have been selectively excluded were it not to provide some sort of benefit to us.
Correct.
So I think we have to have that for some tasks, rely on it and let it kind of run its course. So we kind of like, because for example, what I've been doing obsessively throughout this is putting this pen lid off and on. If I had to think about that whole time, I wouldn't be able to have a conversation with you because like I would, like some things require conscious effort, some things don't. Like for example, digesting my food is pretty useful at the moment, and like that kind of thing. Like if I had to think every time I was going to breathe, I'd been dead a long time ago. So like that kind of subconscious has its point, but when it comes to things that are in opposition to what your subconscious predilection is going to give you and what that kind of pattern of behavior is going to give you, then that's the time to use the conscious mind. When it's like, okay, I want to achieve something, my subconscious is telling me the opposite. Now I've got to exert some conscious willpower, which is going to work to a degree, but by doing that, it's going to reinforce the subconscious narrative that I actually want. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy there. Yeah, spot on, man. Yeah, and I think people need to understand that we're wired a certain way from a survival instinct. Like naturally, this is, we talk about our upbringing of the last 20 years, maybe, whatever it may be. That's why we are a certain way. What about the last 2,000 years? Like we are wired this way for a reason. Okay, sure. The times today are a lot different than they were 1,000 years ago, and so on, right? Yeah. But again, this is what we got. These are the tools that we got. This is the hardware. It's our job to control the software. Yeah, exactly right. And going on that point again, like it's not just about what you've experienced, it's what your parents experienced, what they experienced, and what their parents experienced, and it just goes on and on and on and on, and like to this point where you've got a kind of, like you said, the hardware is pretty much ingrained. Like you're going to make very few differences to that, but you can choose a few options that are going to set you up completely differently, and that is the choice there. Like that's the power that you have. The conscious mind is like, okay, I can choose this. That's it, man. That's my whole jam, man. You're one conscious decision away from an entirely different life. Exactly right. Again, so many places. What kind of, how do you use visualization with athletes? A lot of times it's prior to going somewhere. So for example, like, I don't know, so let's say a new athlete's they're going to Wadapalooza for the first time. So beforehand, sometimes I'll get them to visualize the day, like tomorrow morning, like getting up, doing the routine, getting to the airport, flying to Miami, arriving at Wadapalooza. They know what it looks like. They've seen pictures of Wadapalooza. So I want to picture them walking around, if there's an event, get them walking through the events. And if it's a specific event, sometimes I'll get them to walk through an event. So I'll get them to breathe, put them into a certain state, focus on visualization. And then I want them to go out there, hear the crowd,
hear 3, 2, 1, hear the buzzer go, run up to the bar, grip the bar. I want them to feel these things in their mind. So when they go out and physically do it, it's familiar. I mean, we think about, I don't know, let's say somebody's got to go do something that they've never done before. And they're a little nervous because it's like the unexpected. They don't know what it's going to be like. They don't know what the people are going to be like. They don't know what the environment's going to be like. They don't know what to expect. So when there's some sort of connection, just a surface level of visualization, when you actually go there and do it, something feels oddly familiar, and a lot of times that can be the difference maker of putting some nerves to ease.
Yeah. Like if we're thinking about whether we're in the known or the unknown, like we'll hold back and won't give our all if it feels dangerous, and that's the unknown. But if there's a part of you that feels like you've been there before, even if it's a small part of you, like a really tiny part, that is often enough to create the familiarity of like, oh, I'm in the known, I'm safe, I'm structured, I'm in order, and therefore I can become a bit more vulnerable. And from like a very primal point of view, I can get to a point where I'm lying on the floor and very exposed. And someone could do me harm. But if I'm feeling safe, if I'm feeling certain, if I'm not looking around judging myself and other people and feeling like I'm an outsider, then again, that can create some sort of change for us.
Totally. I think the big thing is that people understand, especially in CrossFit, this is a game of milliseconds, man. Like hundreds of a seconds, 1,000 of a seconds. I mean, Emily scored her ticket at 2020 at Wadapalooza for the games by winning by 0.4 of a second. Maybe, and again, the credit goes to the athletes, but maybe that visualization the night before impacted it by 0.4 of a second. I mean, I can't tell you, I can't make it tangible, but all I can tell you is that all of these little things compound and add up and make the world of a difference.
That's the funny thing about mindset, isn't it? Like weightlifting coaches, it's like, I can put five pounds on your snatch within X weeks. Or nutritionists, like, we can get you to this body composition within this time. Like, we can take your Fran time down, we can take your Murph time down, we can do all these very quantifiable things. But when it comes to mindset, we are so disconnected as a culture from our mental states that we want proof. And that's not the way our mental state works. It's completely nebulous. It's like kind of everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah, especially when I say things like the mind doesn't know the difference between reality and what we tell it, right? So, and when we're looking for proof, sometimes we need something that's tangible. And that's what's challenging about mindset. That's why when you talk about journaling, I mean, that's something that becomes tangible. Like you're writing things down. Sometimes you can see that transition. You can see how things start to evolve and change. That's, it's funny. It's so cool having this conversation with you because you get it. Like, this is what we do, right? So it's refreshing, and it makes me happy that there's more people out there like us teaching stuff like this, because yes, of course, this is my belief, this is your belief, but when you look at the vast majority of people that have trained their mind or worked on their mindset, the results have been big. And again, even though I can't measure it as in you're going to get 5 pounds on your snatch, but if you talk to every single one of those athletes, a lot of times they'll reference their mindset.
Yeah. And what you don't realize as well is when you're speaking to an athlete who hasn't done kind of official mindset work, they've grown up in an environment where they've had that mindset lesson given to them as their normalcy, or they've had a coach who's often that, or they've had the kind of experiences through reading or through observing something. And they've like, those are the kind of athletes that didn't offer a good perspective on mindset, because it seemed like you either have or you don't. But they simply just don't know why they're successful. And they think it's down to like just this grit it out and kind of because I'm better than everyone. It's the talent myth again. But they've had the environment that produces that. And that's not prohibitive to someone else, because we're now in a situation where you can listen to conversations like we're having, you can read books, you can find other coaches where that is an option to you. Like, you have that available to you, and you can train your own mindset now. It's a trainable thing, just like your physical state. Completely agree. What? We'll go for this. What books have you gifted to other people?
Oh man, so that whole relentless thing has been, it's so my book, man. So Tim Grover, Relentless. like I adore this book, man. That's again just the relentless work ethic, that mindset, the proof. People like Kobe, people like MJ, like it just shows like you can stop at nothing. So that's the physical side of things. Same thing with like David Goggins, can't hurt me. Like that's like next level. Like I'm not gonna say madness, but like just execution. Okay. Now, when you actually talk about mindset, there's a book, there's a book that's called Talent Code that I love. But there's another great book. It's by Peter Bregman. It's called 4 Seconds. And this book is like, man, you think about, imagine having the ability to have 4 seconds before you respond in any capacity. So let's say you're in a heated argument, like me and my ex-girlfriend, and I just blurt something out. If I would have taken 4 seconds, I probably wouldn't have blurted that thing out. So having that little blip before you take action is super beneficial as well. I like that. Man, yeah, there's so many books. God, like flow. I mean, yeah, I think the list can go on and on and on. But the thing with books is it's so subjective to what you're wanting to get out of a book.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I can recommend all these books, but if you're not looking for that type of thing, you're going to think this book's terrible. So I'd say with anybody looking for a book, find out what it is that you want to achieve out of a book, and then get a book in that realm and actually take notes, take things out of it, and then apply it. Like, yeah. Even with these podcasts, like, hey, maybe the idea of journaling sounds really great and it's something you've always wanted to do. But if you don't actually do it, you're not going to get the benefit. Like if you're listening to this, then take something out of it and apply it. You know, one thing that I love to do is when people have these conscious thoughts,